another date, and then he was gone. And I had not graduated from high school yet. I was about I was about 16, 15.
You were 15.
50. I was not a very good dancer, and Maxville was one of those little towns where you didn't dance much. But the jukebox had all of the big band sounds on it, and so that's what we heard. Lots of Glenn Miller, String of Pearls, and In the Mood, and all of those. So they are still my favorite music. They still are.
Like what?
In A String of Pearls, In the Mood, Tuxedo Junction, all of those were, and that's what all the kids that were still in Maxville were dancing to at the time. And that really dates you. That shows how old you really are.
They had a thing during on Mondays, they had a new hit parade.
Oh, yes, the hit parade was still on. Yeah. I remember.
The most famous song of that week. People would bet on it.
You didn't bet on it, not in Maxville.
Well,
no, there was no rap. There was no rap, and there wasn't a whole lot of country. Wasn't real popular then either, except just the really, really old time Western singers. He went to the Marines. He graduated from high school and was gone. And he started writing letters to me. You understand that I was still in high school, so I was still going to basketball games and being a cheerleader and dating a kid that was now and then that was playing basketball, and I don't think Russell liked that much when he found it out. But we didn't have any pledge to each other really at that time. We just wrote letters. So for 2.5 years he wrote me letters, and I wrote letters to him. So he courted me through letters. I have all of his letters. He doesn't have anything that I sent him because he couldn't carry them with him. And I have them in a shoebox, in the original shoebox, tied with a string, and my daughter gets them whenever she wants them. She can have them. He wouldn't really describe anything in the letters. He couldn't really describe a lot in the letters he wrote me. They were just mainly partly love letters, and
I couldn't say where I was.
He couldn't say where he was. And he continued to be the focus of my life, even though I was I was really very young and very immature. But an interesting thing about all this is that my mother lived all of this with me. I mean, she read every letter that he ever wrote me, and she read probably every letter I sent to him, because they were very, very involved in and very interested in the war and very worried about the war. And I don't know whether she ever thought that anything would come of this, but she certainly said a lot of prayers for this man that was gone, or this boy that was gone.
Boy.
He was a boy. And it was interesting. My sister just loves that story that when he appeared at the door and I didn't know he was coming home, and she happened to be there, and she was about 12, and she said, "Jackie, Russell's here." And I had no idea he was coming home. And my hair was in pin curls. I looked lovely. And he arrived with a diamond ring, and I hadn't seen him for 2.5 years.
Spent all my monthly house pay
So
on a diamond ring.
It was one of those things like you see in the movies, a courtship and a love affair through the mail. It was very romantic, really. I don't really think that I was mature enough. I was mature enough to be very, very afraid of the war and what might happen to him. But I was still young enough that I wasn't giving up my high school activities. I was still girl enough that I thought it wasn't as serious probably to me as it was to him because he was in danger. But I felt all that, except that I still was just pretty immature. Really not very old. He came to my high school graduation. He arrived in time for that and came to my high school graduation. And then we went to K-State in the fall together. We had no fatalities in my family from the war, as far as I can remember. I don't know about Russell's family.
No.
Two families lost their only sons, and that's all the children that they had. They just had the ones. Each of them had just one son. It was very tragic for a town that small. Very patriotic town. Of course, all the towns were at that time. Everybody picked up tin foil and, did all of that stuff, collected stuff for the war effort. Yeah, just tin foil and from gun wrappers and everything like that.
They were saved tinfoil for the war effort.
And my mother had stamps of some kind for food, certain things that she could and couldn't buy. And I do remember the shortage of sugar. I do remember there was no margarine. You got that horrible little package of stuff that turned the grease orange to make it look like butter. It didn't taste like butter. But, and I don't know how they got along about gasoline. I never did talk to my dad about that. I'm sure they were very limited with gasoline.
Well, there were several different kinds of ration stamps.
Yes, there were.
My dad was a rural mail carrier, so he got more gas than most people did.
Right, but my dad did not. He was a banker and an insurance man, and so he had to suffer just like everybody else as far as gas.
And schools stopped most athletic contests. We didn't have any basketball. The little town where I grew up was crazy about football, and they saved all their gasoline for a football game and canceled football or canceled track and basketball.
Maxville continued to play high school basketball with with the number of people that they had. We just didn't have a very big school. I don't remember who told me. Did your mother tell me?
Probably my mother.
I sort of knew who his parents were by that time, although my parents and his parents were not close friends yet at that time. But I think I must have heard about it through his family because I would not have received any notice since I was not family.
I was wounded and recovered and was censoring. So actually I could send out some things I really wasn't supposed to send.
I think your mother must have called my mother and told us that.
There was a lady who worked for the Red Cross that lived in our town. Her name was Catherine Kaiser, and they called her Kay Kaiser. And we went from San Diego to San Francisco, joined a convoy, and wound up in Maui. We landed on Kahului. And I went into this place, and here was this lady from my hometown. Kay Kaiser, her nickname. And her dad was a mail carrier. My dad was a real mail carrier. And while I was recovering, they had me censoring. So I could send about anything. And I had to be really careful. Weren't supposed to say where we were or anything, but in my letter to my folks I said, I saw Kay Kaiser today. Hoping my folks, my dad would figure out that she's talking about Jim Kaiser's daughter.
And not the band leader.
And not the band leader. And then they figured that out, and they called Jim Kaiser and asked where Kay was. and they knew where she was. I mean, Kahului on Maui.
Oh, there were lots of stories like that about high school girls, and I don't know, the high school girls I think grew up pretty fast about that time.
Well, when I was writing letters home, you didn't have an opportunity too often. But when I was writing letters home, I guess I was thinking ahead that someday I would be home and I would get to really meet her.
We already met each other twice.
Well,
Twice.
Really, we hadn't
We didn't really know each other
really
that well.
know each other. But for some reason, I thought she was really special.
And I did too. I knew there was something special about him, but I just didn't know what it was.
But we were both pretty young. I was barely 18 and she was 15.
Now, he used to tell me that he had had not much experience with girls. So maybe that's why he decided that he liked me. I was just available. Suppose. I'm really awfully glad that we did not, weren't at the age where we would get married and then he would be sent off to war. Like you saw in a lot of movies. They got married and then he left. I'm glad that we were that young enough that we didn't do that because I was definitely not ready to do that. And I don't think that he was either.
No, I wasn't.
Going to college together and being engaged already, we knew that we would get married sometime, but we really expected to finish school. And I certainly expected to finish my sophomore year. And I didn't have an opportunity to do that because I was really, really sick at my stomach. And that's another story that my sister likes to tell. That I called home to my mother and said, I just feel awful. I don't know what's the matter with me. We were married. And I said, I'm just so sick. And my sister said that my mother hung up the phone and said, well, I know what's the matter with her, even if she doesn't know. So you see how naive we both really were. So I didn't finish college for 25 years.
But you did finish.
I did finish. I got my bachelor's from Marymount and my master's from K-State. And I also had 4 children at the time that all this happened. I already had them. One of them was already in college.
I have an uncle whom I was named after. My Uncle Russ was involved in politics. And when I was a junior, he wanted to know if I would be interested in an appointment to Annapolis or West Point. And I said no. My 2 scoutmasters had joined the Marine Corps and survived Pearl Harbor, and I wanted to do what they did, and so and so and so. So I refused an appointment to West Point or Annapolis. And once I got overseas and saw a little bit about what a war was really like, I was thinking, I think I made a bad mistake. How can I change this?
It was a different time.